building muscle and cutting fat. That's what preseason's all about. And it looks like, at least metaphorically, the San Jose Earthquakes have done just that. It's been finally confirmed, it's been made official from Carlos Gruezo that he will be departing the San Jose Earthquakes and he's moving on to LDU Quito. That's a club in Ecuador. So my name is Kevin. I'm joined by Luis. We're the Quakes Holics, and today we're going to talk about Carlos Gruezo's recent departure. Luis, first thoughts on this?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like I can sum it up in 2 words. Good riddance. I am glad that we, like you said, cut the fat, and I think it's time to move on. I've had my mindset on Gruezo for a while now.
Yeah, I was definitely more patient with Gruezo during the season, but seeing the moves that we've made in this offseason, specifically in bringing in Chicho and looking at how much players are making, how much they're producing, I do think that this was the right move. And I echo that sentiment. Good riddance, but I guess good luck.
Yeah, I guess. Now that he's not in black and blue, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the actual deal itself is unknown. This has only been confirmed from Ecuador, the club that he's going to, LDU Quito, and from Carlos Gruezo himself. There's been no official statement from the Quakes, so we don't know if we got money for this move, how much money it could be. But there are 3 scenarios. The first one is we sold him, which I think I would take any amount of money. The second scenario is that we bought the contract out and he's walked as a free agent, which I think would probably be the worst of the scenarios. And the third one, which is a result of a recent rule change in rosters, is that we could have loaned him. If a club loans out a designated player and the entire salary is covered by the team that they're going to, then that player no longer occupies the designated player spot on the roster.
I think that the loan deal, I'd be okay with that. I mean, especially the last part about the wages being covered by the other party or team. But hopefully, ideally would be obviously like we just cut the losses, cut the connections, send him on his way, and hopefully recover a little bit of the money that we paid for.
Because remember, this was at the time a club record signing when Gruezo did come. So, like I said, getting money for this deal would be the best case scenario. But either way, this move had to be made with the arrival of Chicho that put us at 4 designated players, and you can only have 3. And it seems pretty clear that Hernan is the future for the Quakes. He was going to move, and Cristian Espinosa is too vital, too integrated. And I mean, we saw the preseason pictures. Gruezo wasn't in any of those pictures, and so it was kind of like the writing was on the wall. And now the move has finally been made.
And it's also true, that he is a player that has been called up to the national team, and as recently as the last summer's Copa America, he was playing for Ecuador. He was in the squad. He was getting minutes. So I've always thought that even if he doesn't have those performances for Quakes, there's still something of value there.
There's a lot of Quakes fans that are happy about this. So do you want to move on to getting into probably why people are happy about this?
Just from the impression that I have of him after 2 seasons now that he's been with the team, is he's just too passive. And I often get the feeling that he could be doing more, especially when you go back and look at plays, look at goals and try to analyze like what happened here. There's a lot of times where you just see him sort of like looking around or like just kind of jogging as a 6, especially a 6 of that mold that's more of like a destroyer. That's the last feeling or impression you want to have about a player, is that they can be giving more, because that's a role in a position that is reliant on effort. It's not awful, some of the statistics. He has decent tackling statistics, but I mean, there's other things too where it's just like, it just does not look good. Some noteworthy statistics that I was looking at were he's 95th percentile in fouls committed, which to me means that sure, he's not afraid to go in the book if he needs to stop a counterattack or a play or what have you. But it also, to me, signifies that somewhere, whether it be his specifically or just the defensive component of the team that he is a part of, there's a lot of mistakes happening, because that's, usually when you foul, because you need to, because a player has gone by you and it's all you can do. Also, his tackling success rate is in the 18th percentile, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know. It's just not good. And, these are like his defensive statistics. When you look at his statistics on the ball, they are not good. Overall, it's one of those things as well where you have to evaluate what you're getting for the money that's being paid, and it's just not worth the the performance to dollar ratio is just not justifiable at all.
And this isn't just us basing off of statistics. I do want to make a point that these are things that we make mentions of while we're watching the team play, but we're relying on these statistics to basically validate those feelings. Because sometimes you can see things on the field and it's not always there. But I do think that of all the criticisms that are made of Quakes players, I think Gruezo is the most valid one. And what you said about money is a really, really big factor in this. I went through the MLS player reports just to see what are the different salaries, and I filtered through and found all defensive midfielders. I put it into a spreadsheet, and then I sorted by guaranteed compensation. And Carlos Gruezo is, at least by these reports, which came out in, I think it was either September or October of last year, he's the third highest paid defensive midfielder in the league. And when you look at the players that he's next to in these salaries, you don't think of him at that caliber of player. And yes, there is a tax of playing in California, so players are going to ask for money. There's a tax of playing for San Jose because it isn't as, it's not as easy as a sell to a player as like Miami. Like players will take a pay cut to play at Miami, like who doesn't want to play with Messi? So that is part of it. But even then, if you think about like the role as a designated player, which is what these salary ranges basically represent, if you're putting all of your eggs into these baskets, or at least a lot of your eggs into these baskets, you need results. And comparing to these players, he's just not at that level. So there are two players that I want to start off highlighting that were in this defensive midfielder list, but I don't know if I would consider them defensive midfielders. They could be considered just central midfielders, and actually looking at FootMob, that is their primary position. So on just this comparison, Carlos Gruezo doesn't look that bad. So I do want to throw that out there just so that no one can try to make like a counter argument to this. But then moving on to looking at actual defensive midfielders. So Gaston Jimenez, Nwobodo, and Gaston Brugman. These are players that are making 1.4 million or more. So it is very similar to Carlos Gruezo. And you just look at these charts and it is so different. You see green bars all across the board in defensive statistics, and you see a lot of green bars in possession and attacking. And when you look at Carlos Gruezo, it's just red bars. And you go down the list to players that are making even less money. So this is like the 1 million to 1.2 million range. Ilie Sanchez, Andres Cubas, James Sands, Keaton Parks. It's a similar story. There's green bars all throughout the reports, and especially in these defensive statistics. And it's just so much red, and we see that in the game. And so this really illustrates why a lot of people are happy about this move. And yes, we now need a 6. We need a new defensive midfielder, which we'll get to, but it's a good thing that a player that is making this much money is being moved on from.
Again, these are statistics that compare midfielders generally, not just defensive midfielders. So some of these statistics defensively for Gruezo aren't bad, but they're also compared to eights, maybe even more other defensive midfielders that aren't there just to defend, like maybe, like a Busquets would be. Even these statistics defensively, which are okay, are somewhat inflated because he's being compared to midfielders that have different responsibilities and responsibilities on the ball as well. And I also think, talking about the impressions that you get of Gruezo, that's probably another reason why we have that feeling that he's passive. Game just kind of passes him by, is because he's not really getting on the ball. And that'd be okay if those defensive statistics were higher and if we got the impression watching him in person that he was putting in the work to defend, or running around all over the place. I mean, even Judson, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the best 6 dogged player that we've had for a while here. He is nothing like Gruezo. Gruezo, it doesn't give you that impression at all. I think that's the kind of benchmark that you would be expecting from a DP6 that is there to defend. But it's just not comparable.
It's clear that this was the right decision to move on from Gruezo, but now we do need someone to fulfill that defensive midfield responsibility. Is there anyone on the roster currently that you think can fill that? Or do you think the Quakes need to go out and buy someone?
Yeah, I mean, we did sign Ian Harkes, of course, from New England Revolution, but I think that from my understanding, he was more of a utility player. That's kind of the impression that I got from kind of reading through the subreddit, the New England subreddit, seeing what some of the fans had to say about him. And, looking at his statistics, he seems to be a pretty decent player, especially for a depth piece on the ball, but his defensive statistics aren't really, there, especially to fulfill that role that we need, especially when you think about it being, San Jose, which has been a team that last season was so porous behind the ball. I think that we definitely need to strengthen that position. And, Chicho and Martinez are great, but last season, scoring goals was a problem, but it wasn't our biggest problem. So I think that those big name signings, they're great. They are inspiring, but if we want to compete, we need to get that defense solidified. And I think that we need, not just want, more midfield depth.
If we got money for this Gruezo move, I can see it happening. If we didn't get money, I will not be as optimistic, but who knows? There's still time left in this window, and we definitely could make the signing ahead of the season.
Right. And of course, we also did get 2 million from Ochoa, which is,
Correct.
not quantity that you just scoff at, right? That's a pretty good amount of money.
Hmm.
But the thing is, it just, if we don't get anyone in, it just kind of makes you question the transfers a little bit. Because, again, Chicho and Martinez are great players, but they both are somewhat substitutable in their profiles. Not exactly, but,
They're
for the most
comparable.
part,
Hmm.
exactly. They're comparable players. So it just kind of makes you question, personally, if I had known that Gruezo was going to leave, which we basically did the second that we got Chicho in because of that DP rule, then that means that the money would be better spent with Chicho and probably a six to get more midfield depth. So, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, we get someone in, and I think that it's something that we need.
So, assuming that we don't get a new six, you're saying that this collection of transfers was probably not a step forward. Would you have preferred to have moved on from either Espinosa or Hernan so that we can keep a six?
I think that you could get a player that gives you more or less what Gresso gives you at least, and not have to fulfill a DP slot, to be totally honest with you, because of how much Gresso was underperforming.
And there's a lot of examples of that in the league. So
Right.
it is true. So for now, you agree that of the DPs, Gruezo was the correct one to move on from, but that there should be an expectation that there is a replacement.
Right. It's not like this is like we're losing, a core piece of the team. That should have been what he was, but he wasn't. It's fair to sacrifice having that player be a DP level player to just get some depth and, to have some rotation. And the other DPs make sense. Espinoza, first name on the team sheet. Hernan is good. Technically, he's very good, and he's young too. And Chicho, of course, he's been goal scorer in this league. So, and yeah, and if we're gonna just be outscoring the other team, if that's kind of what we're going for, I'm okay with that. But at the same time, we still need to have more depth in the midfield, even just generally, because we've had, two players that, although maybe they weren't upholding the weight they should have been, were still integral parts of the team. And yeah, we don't have that defensive profile really at all at this moment.
Yeah, so only time will tell what the Quakes decide on. I'm really interested to get info on this deal. It'll probably come out in the next day or two, I'm assuming. If that comes out before we finish editing, we'll probably put a screenshot at the beginning, so you will have the the advantage of knowing all the full terms of the deal. But anyways, that's all from us. If you enjoyed the video, consider the typical YouTube pleasantries, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.